The meeting hall was silent. Ambassador Thelnex looked at the holographic display floating above the council table. His 6 eyes blinked slowly as he tried to understand what he was seeing. The images showed destruction on a scale he had never witnessed before. 3 human colony worlds had been attacked. 40 million humans were dead. The Krell Empire had struck without warning. Their warships had appeared in human space and opened fire immediately. The humans had no chance to defend themselves. Cities burned, orbital stations exploded. Children died in their beds as fire rained from the sky. Thelnex had been a diplomat for 300 years. He had seen wars before, but this was different. The Krell were known for their brutality, but they usually gave warnings. They usually made demands. This time they simply killed and left. The Galactic Coalition had maintained peace for 10,000 years. When conflicts arose, the member species talked, they negotiated. They found solutions that did not involve mass murder. The system worked because everyone feared what would happen if they broke the peace. The entire galaxy would unite against them. Thelnex had immediately contacted the human government. He offered them membership in the coalition. He promised protection. He guaranteed that the combined fleets of 40 species would defend human space from further attacks. The humans would be safe. The human representative had listened politely. Her name was Ambassador Chen. She was young by coalition standards, barely 60 years old. Her face was calm as she heard the offer. Too calm, Thelnex thought. When he finished speaking, she smiled. It was not a happy smile. Thank you for the generous offer, Ambassador Chen said, but humanity will handle this ourselves. Elm tried to explain. The Krell had 5,000 warships. They controlled 100 worlds. They had fought the coalition to a standstill twice. Before, humanity was new to space. They had perhaps 200 military vessels. They were outmatched. We understand, Chen replied, and we still decline. This is our problem. We will solve it. The transmission ended. Thelnex reported the conversation to the coalition council. Most representatives were relieved. If the humans wanted to fight their own battles, that was their choice. The coalition would not risk ships defending a species that refused membership. Some species even suggested that the humans would likely negotiate with the Krell. They would pay tribute or surrender territory. It was the logical choice. 2 weeks later, everything changed. The coalition monitoring stations detected a massive energy signature leaving human space. It was enormous. Thelnex requested visual data. What he saw made his blood run cold. The ship was 15 km long. It was shaped like a blade with armor plating that seemed to absorb light. Weapons covered every surface. Thelnex counted 200 main gun batteries. The energy readings showed power plants that could supply an entire planet. The vessel radiated such heat that it distorted space around it. The coalition database had nothing like it. No species had ever built a warship this large. It violated a dozen treaties. The firepower alone was illegal by galactic law. This single ship could destroy fleets. It could crack planets. Thelnex immediately contacted Ambassador Chen again. His voice was urgent. He explained that the ship violated every rule of warfare. The coalition could not allow such a weapon to exist. The humans must deactivate it. Immediately, Chen looked tired. She had dark circles under her eyes. We did not sign your treaties, she said quietly. We are not members of your coalition. Your laws do not apply to us, but they destruction, Thelm pleaded. That ship could kill billions. It could turn worlds into wastelands. Yes, Chen agreed. That is exactly what it was designed to do. The Krell killed 40 million of our people, our children, our parents, our lovers and friends. They did it without mercy, without warning, without reason. Her voice grew colder. We will respond in kind. Transmission showed the ship in the background behind Chen, painted on its hull in letters 300 tall was its name. UNC Retribution. That ship is commanded by Admiral Elena Vyulov, Chen continued. She lost her daughter in the attacks. Her only child. The Admiral has been given full authority to prosecute this war as she sees fit. She will not stop until the Krell Empire surrenders or ceases to exist. Belnax felt fear grip his heart. He had studied human history. These creatures came from a death world. Their planet tried to kill them constantly. Storms that could flatten cities, earthquakes that could split continents, predators that hunted them, disease that killed millions. Humans survived by being more vicious than everything trying to kill them. Other species evolved on peaceful worlds. They developed intelligence and society. Humans evolved in constant war with their own planet. They learned to build weapons. They learned to destroy. They became very good at it. Please, Thelnak said, reconsider. There must be another way. Diplomacy, negotiations. We can mediate. Chen shook her head. Krell had their chance for diplomacy. They chose violence. Now they will learn what happens when you awaken something that should have been left sleeping. She leaned forward. We will not be victims. Again, tell your coalition to stay out of our way. The transmission ended. Thelanek sat in silence for a long time. He pulled up the file on war. Marshal Kresh, the leader of the Krell Empire. Kresh was a proud warrior. He came from a long line of conquerors. The Krell believed that strength was everything. They respected only power. Thelnak sent a message to Kresh. He warned him about the human warship. He begged the Krell to negotiate before it was too late. The response came back within an hour. Kresh was laughing. One ship, the war marshal said. The weak humans send one ship against the might of the Krell Empire. Let them come. We will add their bones to the pile with the rest of their pathetic species. They should have accepted extinction quietly. Thelnax closed the communication. He felt a terrible certainty settle over him. The Krell did not understand. They thought in terms of numbers. They had more ships so they would win. They had never faced an enemy that did not care about numbers, an enemy that would sacrifice everything for revenge. The UNC Retribution left human space and jumped to faster than light travel. Its destination was classified, but Thelnax knew where it was going. He had seen this before thousands of years ago. Species pushed too far. A species that decided mercy was weakness. A species that chose total war. That species was extinct now. They had destroyed their enemies, then they had destroyed themselves. The galaxy had taken 3,000 years to recover from that war. Thelnax wondered if history was about to repeat itself. He sent one final message to the Coalition Council. It was simple. Prepare evacuation protocols for all worlds near Krell space. The humans have gone to war, may the stars have mercy on us all, because they will show none. The Krell military outpost on Krathar was buzzing with activity. 2 billion Krello lived on this world. Half were soldiers, the other half supported them with food, weapons, and supplies. The planet was a fortress. Orbital defense platforms surrounded it. Shield generators could protect the surface from bombardment. 300 warships patrolled the system. Admiral Elena Vyulov stood on the bridge of the Retribution. Her face showed no emotion as she looked at the tactical display. The Krell defenses were impressive. Any normal fleet would need months to break through. She had no intention of breaking through. Open a channel to the surface, she ordered. Her voice was steady, cold. All frequencies, make sure everyone can hear. The communications officer nodded. A moment later, every screen, every radio, every device on Keller received the same message. Admiral Vyulov spoke clearly. This is Admiral Elena Volkov of the United Nations Space Command. You have 24 hours to evacuate this planet. After that time, Kralthar will be destroyed. This is your only warning. The transmission ended on the surface. Krell military commanders looked at each other. Some laughed, others were confused. One human ship was threatening an entire fortified world. It was insanity. Fleet Commander Vrax was in charge of the system defenses. He was a veteran of 30 battles. He had never lost a fight. When he heard the human message, he roared with laughter. The weak humans think they can frighten us, he announced to his officers. Send the fleet, destroy that pathetic ship. Bring me the human admiral alive. I want to mount her head on my wall. 300 Krell warships moved to intercept the Retribution. Each ship was heavily armed. Each ship had fought in dozens of battles. The Krell were confident their fleet had destroyed coalition task forces before. One human ship would be easy prey. On the Retribution bridge, Captain James Morrison watched the Krell fleet approach. He was Admiral Volkov's second in command. He had served with her for 15 years. He knew her better than anyone. He saw the grief she carried. He saw the rage that burned inside her. Admir, he said quietly, they are not evacuating. Civilians are still on the surface. Volkov did not look at him. Her eyes remained fixed on the approaching fleet. In her mind, she saw her daughter's face. Sarah had been 8 years old. She loved drawing pictures of stars. She wanted to be an explorer when she grew up. She died when the Krell bombed her school. There was not enough left of her body to bury. They made their choice, Vyulov said. Her voice was like ice. Weapons free, engage. Retribution opened fire. Plasma lances erupted from the main batteries. Each shot carried enough energy to vaporize a city. The beams crossed space in seconds. Krell shields flared and died. Krell armor melted. Krell ships exploded. The Kree fleet tried to return fire. Their weapons hit the Retribution shields and did nothing. Human shield technology was decades ahead. The Krell might as well have been throwing rocks. Antimatter torpedoes launched next. Each torpedo contained enough antimatter to crack a moon. Dozens of torpedoes streaked toward the Krill formation. When they detonated, space itself seemed to tear. 20 Krill ships vanished in expanding spheres of pure energy. Fleet Commander Vras screamed orders. His ship scattered. They tried to flank the human vessel. They tried to overwhelm it with numbers. Nothing worked. The Retribution tracked every ship, its computers, calculated firing solutions faster than biological minds could think. Gravitational disruptors activated. These weapons created artificial gravity. Wells, Krell ships were pulled off course, hulls crushed under impossible forces. Some ships were torn apart. Others collided with each other. The battle lasted 47 minutes, 300 Krell warships were destroyed, not damaged. Not disabled, destroyed. Debris float in space where a proud fleet had been. The Retribution had not even been scratched. Captain Morrison stared at the tactical display. He had been in combat before. He had seen ships die. But this was different. This was not a battle. This was an execution. Admiral, he said, his voice shook slightly. Fleet is destroyed. The orbital defenses are offline. They cannot stop us now. Perhaps we could offer them another chance to evacuate. Volkov checked the time. 23 hours and 14 minutes remained. She opened communications to the surface. Again, you have been given a warning. You have been given time. Use it wisely. There will not be another message. On. Kreller panic spread. The military commanders who had laughed were dead. Their ships were debris. The civilians realized the human was serious. Evacuation ships began launching. Millions tried to flee, but billions remained. Some refused to believe a single ship could destroy a planet. Others had nowhere to go. Many were too proud to run from a human. The culture valued strength. Running was weakness. Better to die than show fear. 24 hours passed. Vyulov looked at Morrison. He could see she wanted him to say something, to tell her not to do this, to give her a reason to show mercy. He said nothing. What could he say? Mercy had not saved her daughter. Commence orbital bombardment. Vyulov ordered. The Retribution unleashed hell. Every weapon fired at once. Plasma lances carved trenches across continents. Antimatter torpedoes detonated in the atmosphere, creating firestorms that consumed cities. Kinetic projectiles moving at near light speed struck the surface with the force of nuclear weapons. The planet's crust cracked. Magma erupted from fissures miles wide. The atmosphere caught fire. Oceans boiled away into steam. Mountains were leveled. Cities became molten glass. The bombardment lasted 6 hours. When it stopped, Cathar no longer existed as a habitable world. The surface was a burning wasteland. The sky was black with ash. Nothing could live there. Nothing would live there for thousands of years. 2 billion Krell had died. Most were civilians who had simply refused to believe. The coalition monitoring stations recorded everything. Across the galaxy, representatives watched in horror. This was not war. This was extermination. Emergency sessions were called. Everyone agreed something had to be done about the humans, but no one could agree on what. Ambassador Thelnex tried to contact Admiral Vyulov. The communication was refused. He tried to speak with Ambassador Chen. She answered but looked exhausted. You have committed a war crime, Thelnex said. He tried to keep his voice steady. 2 billion civilians are dead. The coalition cannot ignore this. Chen nodded slowly. Yes. 2 billion Krell are dead. Do you want to know how many humans the Krell killed before we stop them? She pulled up a hologram. Name scrolled past. Millions of names. 40 million humans. We gave the Krell a chance to evacuate. Many did. Those who remained made their choice. Where will this End, Thelnex asked. How many worlds will burn before humanity is satisfied? Chen looked directly at him. As many as it takes. The Krello wanted war. Now they have it. They will surrender or they will cease to exist. Tell your coalition to stay out of our way. The transmission ended. Del sat in his office for a long time. He thought about all the species that had gone to war. Over the centuries, most had followed rules. They tried to minimize civilian deaths. They negotiated truces. They showed mercy. Humans did not seem to understand mercy, or perhaps they understood it too well and had chosen to abandon it. The retribution jumped to its next target. In Krell space, fear began to spread. The humans were coming, and they would show no mercy. The retribution moved through Krelles like death itself. Every 7 days a new target was selected. Every 7 days. Admiral Vyulov sent the same message. Evacuate 24 hours, no exceptions. Some Krello worlds listened. Billions fled in massive evacuation efforts. Ships overloaded with refugees jumped to neutral systems. The coalition accepted these refugees reluctantly. They had nowhere else to go. Other Krello worlds refused. Pride was ingrained in their culture. Their ancestors had conquered half the galaxy. They would not run from a single human ship. They prepared defenses. They gathered fleets. They waited. The retribution destroyed them. All 6 Krell worlds became wastelands. Infrastructure that took centuries to build was reduced to rubble in hours. Billions of Kree died or became refugees. The mighty empire that had threatened the coalition for generations was crumbling. War Marshal Kresh watched his empire fall apart. Reports came in constantly. Another world burned. Another fleet destroyed. The humans were unstoppable. More importantly, they were relentless. They did not negotiate. They did not pause. They simply moved from target to target methodically, destroying everything. Kresh called emergency meetings with his commanders. They argued about strategy. Some wanted to mass all remaining forces and overwhelm the human ship. Others suggested surrendering before more worlds died. Crash rejected both options. Surrender was unthinkable. Death was preferable to shame. The Galactic Coalition could not ignore the situation any longer. Dozens of species demanded intervention. The human destruction violated every law of warfare. Even if the Krello started the conflict, the human response was excessive barbaric evil. A coalition fleet was assembled. 20 species contributed ships, 500 vessels in total, not to attack the humans, but to force a ceasefire. They would position themselves between the retribution and the next Krello target. Surely the humans would not fire on coalition ships. Ambassador Thelnex commanded the fleet. He did not want this responsibility, but someone had to try to stop the madness. The fleet jumped to the Krell system of Vorten. 3 billion Krello lived there. The retribution was already in orbit, preparing to bombard. Thelnex opened a channel to Admiral Vyulov. Her face appeared on the screen. She looked thinner than before. There were dark circles under her eyes, but her expression was still cold, still determined. Admiral Vyulov Thelnex began. The coalition has decided that this war must end. We are positioning our fleet between you and Vorten. You cannot bombard this world without going through us first. Vyulov was silent for a moment. Then she spoke quietly, too quietly. Ambassador, I warned the coalition too. Stay out of this, I told you what would happen if you interfered. Surely you would not fire on coalition vessels. Thelnax said, we are not your enemy. We are trying to prevent more deaths. You are preventing justice, Vyulov replied. The Krello killed my people. They will pay the price. Anyone who defends them shares their guilt, Captain. Morrison stood beside Volkov on the bridge. He leaned close and whispered. Urgently, the coalition was not their enemy, they were trying to help. Attacking them would make humanity enemies with the entire galaxy. Volkov ignored him. She gave an order to her weapons officer, target the moon, she said. The small one, show them what will happen if they do not move. Borton had 3 moons. The smallest was barely 200 km across. It was uninhabited, just a ball of rock and ice. The Retribution fired a single gravitational disruptor. At full power, the moon shattered, not cracked, not damaged, shattered. It broke apart into thousands of pieces. The debris field spread out, glowing hot. From the energy release, where a moon had existed, there was now only dust and fragments. Theeks watched in horror. Power required to destroy a moon was staggering. If the humans fired that weapon at the coalition fleet, they would all die. 500 ships meant nothing against that kind of power. Volkov spoke. Again, her voice was emotionless. You have 1 hour to clear this system. After that, anything in my way will be destroyed. Choose carefully, Ambassador. The transmission ended. Thelnx looked at his fleet commanders. They all showed the same expression, fear. The humans were not bluffing. They would destroy the entire coalition fleet without hesitation. Thelnax gave the order to withdraw. The coalition fleet jumped away. They had failed. 3 billion Krello on Vorton would die, and the coalition could do nothing to stop it. As the coalition ships retreated, Thelnax sent a final message to Vyulov. It was personal, not official. Admiral, I understand your pain. I understand your anger, but this path leads nowhere good. You are becoming the very thing you are fighting against, a destroyer of worlds, a killer of innocence. Is this what your daughter would have wanted? Volkov did not respond immediately. When she did, her voice was so quiet Morrison could barely hear it. My daughter is dead. She wanted to grow up. She wanted to explore the stars. She wanted to meet aliens and make friends. The Krello took that from her. They took that from 40 million humans. What they want no longer matters. What I want no longer matters. Only justice matters. The transmission ended. Vorton burned 6 hours later. In the Kree Empire, panic turned to chaos. The government started to fragment. Some provinces declared independence and tried to negotiate with humanity separately. Others doubled down on resistance. Civil war seemed likely. War. Marshal Crash saw his power slipping away. The empire his ancestors built was collapsing, all because of one human ship, one grieving mother who refused to stop. He made a decision. If he was going to fall, he would take the humans with him. Crash gathered what remained of the Krell military, 2,000 ships, every vessel that could still fly, every soldier who could still fight. He would not attack the Retribution. That ship was too powerful. Instead, he would strike at the heart of humanity itself. He would attack Earth. The plan was desperate. The human home world was surely defended, but maybe, just maybe, if the Krello threw everything they had at it, they could damage it. They could kill millions of humans, they could make the humans feel the same pain they had inflicted. The Krell fleet jumped to human space. They headed directly for the Sol system. Earth was waiting. Captain Morrison was in a meeting with other officers when the alert came through. A massive Krell fleet had appeared on the edge of the Sol system. They were heading for Earth at maximum speed. The retribution was 3 days away. At best, Earth would be on its own. Morrison felt ice in his stomach. If the Krell reached Earth, millions more would die, maybe billions. The orbital defenses were strong, but 2,000 warships were a lot. He looked at Admiral Vyulov, expecting to see panic. Instead, she looked almost sad. The Krell are fools, she said quietly. They think Earth is undefended because the retribution is here. They are about to learn why we only sent one ship. Morrison did not understand at first. Then the report started coming in. The Krell fleet never reached Earth. They encountered humanity's defense grid in the outer solar system. Thousands of automated weapons platforms, minefields that stretched across millions of kilometers. Defense stations that made the retribution look small, and 12 more battleships smaller than the retribution, but each one still more powerful than anything the Krell possessed. The Battle of Sol lasted 30 minutes. 2,000 Krell ships were destroyed before they got within a billion km of Earth. Not one human vessel was lost. War Marshal Crash died when his flagship exploded. His last transmission was a curse against humanity and everything they represented across the galaxy. Everyone who had been watching realized the same thing. The retribution was not humanity's only weapon. It was just the weapon they chose to send. If they wanted to, humans could field a fleet that would crush the entire coalition. The question became, what would stop them? After the Battle of Sol, the Krell Empire fell silent. No more transmissions, no more threats, no more defiance. The loss of their entire attack fleet and War Marshal Crash had broken something fundamental in their society. The retribution arrived at Krell Prime 3 days later. The planet hung in space like a jewel. It was beautiful. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds. 50 billion Krell called it home. It was the oldest world in their empire. Every Krell traced their ancestry back to this planet. Admiral Vyulov stood on the bridge and looked at it. Captain Morrison stood beside her. He had been with her through every battle. He had watched her destroy 6 worlds. He had said nothing because what could he say? The Krell had started this war with mass murder, but now looking at Krell Prime, he could not stay silent. Admiral, he said quietly, 50 billion civilians. Most of them had nothing to do with the attacks on our colonies. They are families, children, people just trying to live their lives. Vyulov did not look at him. Her eyes remained fixed on the planet below. Our colonists were families too, she said. They were children. They were trying to live their lives. The Krell showed them no mercy. I know, Morrison replied, but if we destroy Krell Prime, we become exactly what they are, murderers, monsters. Is that what we want humanity to be remembered as? For the first time in weeks, Vyulov turned to look at him. Her face was gaunt. She had lost weight. The grief and rage that drove her were consuming her from the inside. I stopped caring what people think of me the day my daughter died, she said. But you are right about one thing. The Krell need to Understand what will happen if they ever attack humanity again. A demonstration is required. She turned to the communications officer. Open a channel to the surface, all frequencies. I want everyone to hear this across Krello. Prime, every screen, every radio, every device received the message. Admiral Vylov's face appeared. The Krell who saw her would never forget what they witnessed. Her expression was not angry, not hateful. It was simply tired, empty. This is Admiral Elena Volkov of the United Nations Space Command. I am here to offer the Krell Empire terms of surrender. These terms are non-negotiable. You will accept them or Krello Prime will burn like your other worlds. She paused. On the surface, billions of Kree held their breath. First, the Kree Empire will surrender unconditionally. All military forces will stand down immediately. Second, the Krell will pay reparations to humanity. The amount will be determined by human courts. Third, the Kree Empire will be disarmed. All weapons of mass destruction will be destroyed. Your fleet will be reduced to system defense vessels only. Another pause. Longer. This time, you have 6 hours to transmit your acceptance. If I do not receive confirmation by then, Krello Prime will be reduced to ash. You have seen what I can do. You know I am not bluffing. Choose wisely. The transmission ended. On Krello Prime, chaos erupted. Provisional government that had formed after Kresh's death held an emergency meeting. Some members wanted to refuse. Death with honor was better than surrender, but they were outvoted. The majority understood that this was not about honor anymore. This was about survival. If they refused, 50 billion Krello would die. The species might go extinct. Pride was not worth that price. But there was a problem. The government had only partial control. Military commanders loyal to Kresh's ideology still held power in some regions. They sent a message saying they would never surrender. They called for resistance. They prepared to fight. 3 hours into the deadline, the provisional government realized they could not stop the extremists in time. If those commanders did not stand down, Volkov would destroy the planet, all of it. Everyone would die because a few fools could not accept defeat. The solution was brutal. The provisional government sent their own forces to attack the holdouts. Krell fought Krello. In the streets, bombs exploded in military installations. Thousands died. But it worked. The extremist commanders were killed or captured. 5 hours and 40 minutes after Vylov's ultimatum, the transmission came through. The provisional government of the Krello Empire accepted all terms. They surrendered unconditionally. The war was over. On the Retribution bridge, the crew erupted in cheers. They had won. Humanity was safe. The Krello would never threaten them again. Captain Morrison felt relief wash over him. It was finally over. But Admiral Vyolov did not celebrate. She simply nodded and gave an order. Maintain orbit. Full alert status. The Retribution will remain here for 3 months. If the Krello break any term of the surrender, we finish what we started. 3 months passed. The Retribution stayed in orbit above Krell Prime. Its weapons were always charged. Its shields were always active. The Krell looked up at it every day and remembered what would happen if they broke their word. During those 3 months, the Krello dismantled their empire. Weapons were destroyed. Shipyards were shut down. Militaramies closed. The proud warrior culture that had defined them for thousands of years, was being torn apart. They did it because the alternative was extinction. The Galactic Coalition watched everything happen. They had been unable to stop the human rampage. Now they saw the results. The Krell Empire was broken. 6 worlds were lifeless. Wastelands. Billions were dead or displaced. Humanity had achieved what the Coalition could not do in 10,000 years, but the Coalition was not grateful. They were terrified. Emergency sessions were called. 12 races formally proposed that humanity be designated as a hostile species. Sanctions were suggested. Trade embargoes, diplomatic isolation, even military action was discussed, though no one wanted to actually fight the humans. Ambassador Thelnax attended these meetings. He listened to his colleagues condemn humanity as monsters, war criminals, threat to galactic peace. He understood their fear. He shared it, but he also understood something else. He requested permission to speak. The council granted it. The humans committed terrible acts. Thelnax said they destroyed worlds. They killed billions. They showed no mercy. But let us not forget how this started. The Krell attacked human colonies without provocation. They massacred 40 million civilians. They laughed about it. Some council members tried to interrupt. Thelnax raised his hand for silence. The Coalition did nothing. We offered protection, but we did not punish the Krell. We did not even condemn them. The humans had to defend themselves. Yes, their response was excessive. Yes, they went too far. But can we honestly say we would have done better if 50 of our worlds had been attacked? The chamber fell silent. Thelnax continued, humanity has shown us what happens when you attack a species from a death world, a species that evolved by fighting for survival. Every single day, a species that learned long ago that mercy to enemies is death. For your children, we can condemn them. We can isolate them, but I suggest we do something else instead. What would you suggest? Another ambassador asked. Leave them alone, Thelnax said. Simply never attack humanity, never threaten them, never give them reason to build more ships like the Retribution. Because if we do, they will not stop until we are all extinct. The vote was close, but Thelnax won. The Coalition would impose economic sanctions on humanity. They would condemn the attacks publicly, but they would not take military action. They would not risk provoking the humans further. When they Retribution finally left Krell Prime and returned to human space, Admiral Vyulov was called to Earth. She expected to be celebrated as a hero. Instead, she faced a tribunal. Human leaders were divided. Some saw her as necessary. She had protected humanity when no one else would. Others saw her as a war criminal who had tarnished humanity's reputation forever. The tribunal lasted 6 months. In the end, Volkov was found not guilty of war crimes under human law. The Krell had been warned. Those who stayed made their choice, but she was forced into retirement. The Retribution would have a new commander. On the day of her retirement, Captain Morrison visited her apartment. She was packing her belongings. She looked older now. The fire that had driven her was gone. Only ashes remained. Was it worth it? Morrison asked. Volov thought about it for a long time before answering. My daughter is still dead. Nothing I did brought her back, but no one will ever attack humanity like that again. Children on our colonies will grow up Safe because the galaxy knows what happens if they threaten us. She looked at Morrison. I became a monster so they could sleep peacefully. Yes, it was worth it. Morrison left without another word. He did not know if he agreed with her. He did not know if what they had done was right, but he knew one thing for certain. The galaxy would never forget, and they would never forgive. Humanity was safe, but they were also alone. 5 years passed. The galaxy settled into an uneasy peace. The Krell Empire remained broken. They had rebuilt some infrastructure, but they would never again be the power they once were. Their warrior culture was gone. A generation of Krell children grew up learning that violence leads to extinction. Humanity remained isolated. The economic sanctions were still in place. Most species refused to trade with humans. Diplomatic relations were minimal. When human ships entered coalition space, they were tracked constantly. Everyone wanted to know where the dangerous species was at all times. The Retribution and its 12 sister ships remained in service. They patrolled human space constantly. Their weapons were always ready. The galaxy had learned what happened when you attacked humanity. The humans wanted to make sure no one forgot. Admiral Vulov lived quietly in retirement. She had a small apartment overlooking a lake. She spent her days reading and walking. She rarely spoke to anyone. She had become famous, but not in the way she expected. Half of humanity saw her as a hero. The other half saw her as a reminder of humanity's capacity for evil. She kept a picture of her daughter on her desk. Sarah's smiling face looked out at her every day. Sometimes Vulov wondered what Sarah would think of what she had done. Would she be proud? Would she be horrified? Volkov would never know. Then something changed, something that would test everything humanity had become. The Devourers arrived. No one knew where they came from. They appeared at the edge of the galaxy and began moving inward. They were not a species in the traditional sense. They were machines, or perhaps biological organisms that had merged with machines. No one could tell. What everyone knew was that the Devourers consumed everything. They landed on planets and stripped them bare. Every resource was harvested. Every structure was broken down. Every living thing was killed and processed. Within days, thriving worlds became empty husks. The Devourers moved fast. They had thousands of ships, maybe millions. Their technology was advanced beyond anything the galaxy had seen. Coalition fleets that tried to stop them were destroyed effortlessly. 3 coalition worlds fell in the first month, 10 more in the second month. The rate was accelerating. Projections showed the entire galaxy could be consumed within 5 years. Ambassador Thelnax was part of the emergency war council. He listened as military commanders reported disaster after disaster. Every strategy failed. Every weapon was ineffective. The Devourers were unstoppable. Someone made a suggestion, a terrible, desperate suggestion. They needed humanity's help. The room erupted in argument. Some species refused to even consider it. Humanity was dangerous, unpredictable, violent. Others pointed out that humanity was also powerful. If anyone could fight the Devourers, it was them. Thelnax was chosen to make the request. He traveled to human space for the first time in 5 years. His ship was escorted by 3 human cruisers. They did not trust the coalition any more than the Coalition trusted them. The meeting was held on a neutral station, human. Diplomats listened as Thelnax explained the situation. The Devourers were consuming the galaxy. The Coalition needed help. They were asking humanity to deploy their battle fleet. The lead human negotiator was Ambassador Chen. She had aged in 5 years. Her hair was gray now. She listened patiently to Thelnax's plea. When he finished, she leaned back in her chair. The Coalition condemned us for defending ourselves. Chen said, you imposed sanctions. You isolated us. You called us monsters and war criminals. Now you want our help. Thelnax nodded slowly. He had expected this. He had no right to ask for anything, but billions of lives were at stake. Yes, he said simply. We were wrong to abandon you. We should have helped when the Krellel attacked. We should have understood your response. We failed you, but the Devourers do not care about politics. They will consume human worlds just as readily as ours. This threat requires all of us to work together. Chen was silent for a long moment. Then she made humanity's demand. Humanity will help, but we have conditions. First, all sanctions against us are lifted immediately. Second, we receive full pardons for all actions during the Kree War. Third, the Coalition will publicly acknowledge that the Krell attacks justified our response. Fourth, humanity receives a permanent seat on the Coalition Council with full voting rights. Some of Thelnax's advisors protested. The terms were too steep. They were essentially rewarding war crimes, but Thelnax silenced them. They had no choice. The galaxy was dying. Agreed. He said, all of it. Just please help us. Chen nodded. She sent a message to human military command. Within hours, the mobilization began. The Retribution and its sister ships were prepared for deployment. Additional warships were activated. Humanity was going to war again. Admiral James Morrison commanded the human fleet now. He had been promoted after Volkov's retirement, but for this mission he made a request. He wanted Volkov to come out of retirement and serve as his senior advisor. She knew war better than anyone. Morrison traveled to her apartment personally. He knocked on her door and waited. When Volkov answered, she looked surprised to see him. James, she said, what are you doing here? He explained the situation. The Devourers, the Coalition's plea for help, the deployment of the human fleet, and his request for her to join them. Volkov listened without interrupting. When he finished, she shook her head. I am done with war, she said. I did what I had to do, but I will not go back out there. The galaxy needs the monster. Again, Morrison said quietly, they need someone who knows how to win. No matter the cost. That is you. Volkov was quiet for a long time. She looked at the picture of her daughter on her desk. She thought about all the people who would die if the Devourers were not stopped. Children like Sarah, innocent people just trying to live. We became monsters so our children would not have to, she said finally, so the children across the galaxy could sleep safely. The species that condemned us are now begging for our protection. Do you see the irony? I do, Morrison replied, but those children still need protecting, whether their parents appreciate it or not. Vulov smiled sadly. It was the first time Morrison had seen her smile in 5 years. You have learned well, she said. Fine, I will come, but only as an advisor. You are the admiral now. This is your war to fight. They traveled to The retribution together, the crew, welcomed Vyulov back with respect and caution. Everyone remembered what she had done, what she was capable of. She walked through the ship she had commanded and felt the weight of memory. The human fleet jumped to coalition space. 13 massive battleships, dozens of support vessels, thousands of fighters. It was the largest military force humanity had ever deployed, and it was still dwarfed by the Devourer's swarm. The first battle was brutal. The Devourers were stronger than expected. Their shields absorbed plasma lances. Their armor withstood anti-air torpedoes. Human ships took damage for the first time. Crews died, but humans were adaptable. They analyzed Devourer technology. They modified their weapons. They changed tactics. Slowly they began to win. The tide turned. Over the next year, human forces pushed the Devourers back. It was not easy. It cost lives. But humanity had something the Devourers did not understand. They fought not just for survival, but for redemption. They fought to prove they could protect others, not just destroy enemies. The human fleet saved 14 coalition worlds. They evacuated billions of civilians. Ahead of Devourer attacks, they held defensive lines while other species fled. They did everything the coalition had once accused them of being incapable of doing. They showed mercy. They showed restraint. They showed honor. Ambassador Thelnax watched from Coalition Command. He saw human ships sacrifice themselves to protect civilian transports. He saw human soldiers die defending alien colonies. He finally understood what Admiral Volkov had tried to tell him 5 years ago. Humanity had not become monsters because they enjoyed violence. They became monsters because they had to, because no one else would, because someone had to be willing to do terrible things so that innocence could survive. After a year of fighting, the Devourers were pushed back to the edge of the galaxy. They had been stopped. Galaxy was saved. The coalition held a ceremony to honor the human forces. Every species sent representatives. Medals were awarded. Speeches were made. The galaxy expressed gratitude, but when the ceremony ended, the sanctions were not fully lifted. Some species still refused to trade with humans. The council seat was granted, but with limited voting rights. The promises made in desperation were being walked back now that the danger had passed. Admiral Morrison stood with Volkov on the bridge of the Retribution. As they prepared to return home, he was angry. The coalition had used them and then betrayed them again. They will never accept us, he said bitterly. We saved their lives and they still see us as monsters. Volkov looked out at the stars. After a moment she spoke. They fear us because they know what we are capable of. That fear keeps them honest. It keeps them from attacking each other. It keeps the peace. We are the monster in the dark that makes everyone behave. Is that not worth something? At what cost? Morrison asked. We will always be alone, always feared, never trusted.